Welcome to 50/50 Books, the book review podcast where the books are split in two, and figuring out just what is going on is always a toss-up. I'm Taylor.
And I'm Jonathan. This time we are reading episode 13 by Craig DiLouie, which is a perfect choice for the time of year. So happy spooky season, Taylor.
Yes, happy spooky.
Great time of year.
Yes.
I'm super excited about this one. I'm not sure I have ever read a horror book before this one, actually.
Honestly, maybe same. Closest might be Coraline? Maybe.
Did you read it?
Oh, I read part of it, and then school took over my life during that period of time.
That's fair.
I feel like
It's also a very long book.
Yes, I kind of have watched a good amount of horror stuff, though.
Mm-hmm.
Like horror games I like to watch, usually. Not play them. Very distinct difference.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I hear you.
Did you mention the range for this, though?
Oh, of what we read?
Yeah, I guess if you're listening to this episode, you know what we read up to, but basically we stopped before day 4. So either get caught up to there or finish it through and then make fun of us for our ideas. Before we jump into anything, though, I would like to know, we put this in every episode we do, but especially for this, just like verbally putting it out there, trigger warnings for this book. I could not find anything specifically listed. I guess people just assume it's a horror book. There will be things, but there's like death, suicide, mentions of an eating disorder, basically. Some unreality, probably. Abuse that's typical with like experiments and like some dehumanization. Some domestic child abuse is mentioned. Police violence also thrown in there, I guess. Yeah. Just, if you're reading this book and it's it's a horror paranormal psychology book, you probably know what you're getting into, but just to be safe with all of that, it's kind of a heavy one going on here today.
It's honestly crazy because when you listed all of those things, it was like, oh yeah, I guess all of that does happen. Like, it didn't really occur to me just how many topics it touches on in the sort of like trigger warning, content warning area.
Yeah, and obviously we haven't finished the book, so there might be more than that, but that's kind of most of what I was able to pick up on during through reading it. And I might have missed some stuff, so I'm very sorry. If you do have anything, always let us know and we can try and add it in, even if it's just in the description part.
Exactly.
Yeah. Okay, so all those details out of the way, I thought something fun could be, we may consume some horror content, maybe not as much, but on a real level, because this book kind of follows like a Blair Witch Marble Hornets type of vibe, where it feels like it's very real. What do we think of ghosts? Are we believers or not believers?
This is a good question. And I'm not sure I have a super strong opinion on it, but I would lean away from believing in ghosts. I don't know. I feel like I don't necessarily not believe in like supernatural things or like an afterlife or something like that, but I do think, I don't know, it's hard to get myself to believe that of like all of the things that would need to be true in order to get to those mystical things, that it would lead specifically to like haunting and ghostliness, I feel like it just feels like the more of a stretch than maybe some other things, which I know is like fully just like an opinion with no real grounding behind it, but it's just like, I don't know, it just seems like what of all things that would happen in an afterlife or with like sort of mystical beings, I just don't think like entertaining humans would be one of the things that they would do. So I just think even if it were true, we wouldn't know.
I think that makes sense. So would you say like you don't necessarily believe, but you're still cautious about those types of things? Like, would you go to a haunted house?
So yeah, it's okay. That's also a really good question, I think. So yes, I do enjoy a good haunted house, actually. Okay. But I do have a limit. Like, I think it's the sort of thing where I don't necessarily believe it's true, but I don't want to find out, Right. So I try not to push the limits of what's out there. I try not to play with, I'm probably not the friend to ask to bring out the Ouija board. It's just, there's a line on what I'm willing to test, even if I don't necessarily believe it's true. Like, what is it? It's like they say, like, don't tempt the devil or whatever. Right. It's, like it's like I'm not gonna be the one to find out.
Yeah, I think when I was younger, I had that opinion. For me, it's kind of like ghosts as thinking entities. No, I don't think that's a thing. I think I can like explain it as, I think places have energy. And so a lot of the negative places that are usually haunted have those negative effects because they have energy in them. I mean, there's more like plausible explanations like carbon monoxide and like mold and like terrible things happening.
Oh God. Yeah.
But a place can have like a negative energy, and then to call it haunted and to have people go there and perpetuate that energy, it like feeds into itself. So I can believe people either like placebo themselves or like they give energy to a place that results in them feeling like a place is haunted, and then it's just like a cyclical thing that happens. But like ghosts with like character and personality and like actually like influencing the world because of some thought, like I don't think that's a thing. I don't even think there's like an afterlife, right? Very much an existentialist, so it's like once you're done, you're kind of done. You just kind of disperse, right? So yes, so that's kind of my view on it. I wouldn't have tempted anything still when I was younger, because like also kind of very agnostic, like I don't know what's out there, so there's no point in pushing it too far, like I don't need to. Right. But now I'm kind of like, now I think I'd be more up for it. Like, what would happen if I sat in a devil's chair? Like, what would be the thing? Just because part of me does want to know, right? I don't know. I guess I'm in this book a little bit like Claire. Like, I think it would be fun to know, but I would have to like truly experience it myself to know, right? But it's a good time.
I think you bring up an interesting point about like perpetuating the energies. One of my favorite theories that Claire brings up in reference to the event that happens that we'll be talking about is psychic projection. And I feel like, yeah, like it's a similar idea of like what people bring into a quote haunted space might define what happens there, right? And certainly is going to define the lens through which you're going to see things that happen around you, right? Like especially like defaulting to like, oh, it must be ghosts because we're in a haunted place and things I can't explain are happening, right? So I feel like there's kind of two sides of it. Like one is the energy you bring in, and one is the perception with what you are willing to see the things that happen. So
right, like similar to how this show is set up with like the believer skeptic, I do watch Ghost Files, which was the same duo that did BuzzFeed Unsolved. And they have like Shane is the skeptic, you know, Ryan's the believer, and they go into the spaces separately, and Ryan is always the one that seems to experience things. So it's very, and it's like, okay, is he experiencing things because things are happening and like ghosts are feeding off his fear? Possibly, maybe, but it's also probable that he's experiencing things because he's looking and like putting that energy out to experience things.
Right.
So, I don't know. But for this book, like we mentioned, or like I mentioned, I guess, it sets itself up as if it's like a nonfiction, kind of like Blair Witch and Marble Hornets, which freaking love Marble Hornets, greatest thing ever. Really into it. Too. I know. So I think an important place to start is there is an editor for this book. Like there is somebody compiling all of this information and also inputting certain details, like how characters are looking and like what is going on in certain scenes. So even if we don't know who they are and they might not be relevant really, it is important to like keep in mind we don't know what their aim is. And I think very early on I was like, the editor is asking us to either believe or don't believe, but I think the editor is also very much trying to get us to believe something is going on here. And obviously that becomes very like, it's impossible not to believe when there's like a tall woman that shows up, right? Yeah. You're like, okay, this is actually, we have to remember this is fiction. Like something supernatural is going on.
Right.
But at least in those early stages, you could kind of play with the idea of like, is something going on or isn't it going on? But the editor, I think, is trying to influence you, I think, a little bit.
Yeah, I definitely think the sort of realism that it was trying to put across at the beginning kind of fooled me a bit. Because I almost did think nothing supernatural was going to happen. I almost thought it was going to be questionable and like a maybe, and there was going to be a pretty continuous back and forth between skepticism and belief.
Right.
So I was super duper shocked when it was like, here's a very clearly supernatural event.
Right.
I didn't think it was going to go that way for sure. Because yeah, the sort of setup of the book makes you believe that it should feel realistic until it doesn't, you know?
Yeah.
I definitely didn't think about the editor aspect though. Like that's a really good point. I think I was kind of taking it as this is a compilation of all of the material that we have, but it's obviously not that because we don't see everything. Not even everything that they mention, which obviously would be too much information anyway. But I think I just assumed like, oh, we're getting like the full picture. But you're right. Like this would be a compilation of materials. It is a compilation of materials. That's why they're labeled as such. So who knows what all of the details are? Who knows what we're not seeing? There's definitely a spin when it comes to like the relationships between the people. Like I almost wonder who it is that is the editor. Like, is it someone from the group? Is it someone from Pulse USA? Like, who is trying to put what spin on it, and like who is the person making money on this being out there?
Right. Because I think in universe, it's easy enough to think, I think what the producers of the show think, which is this tall woman is fake. Like, this is not a real event that has happened.
Right.
Which I think is always going to be the result of ghost hunting. Like, even if you get this crazy shit on camera, because this is crazy shit that happens, right?
Yeah,
like 100% clear. Right. It doesn't matter because people are going to believe what they want to believe, both cynics and believers, like both sides, right? So all the skeptics are going to say it's fake. They 100% this is not real. So I think
I would totally say that.
In universe, you can like expect people to read this book and say it's nonfiction, but this didn't happen. Like they're trying to, make money, put on a show, blah blah blah.
Yeah.
But for us, it's like it's easier for us to believe it did happen because we know it's fiction. And then obviously, like Claire mentions this a lot, people who believe like want to believe, and they don't necessarily have to know with 100% certainty. So whenever she tries to disprove something and she can't, and like it's an anomaly, like scientifically you have anomalies and outliers all the time. Well, I shouldn't say all the time, that doesn't make them anomalies then, but you have them enough where it's like it's not it doesn't matter too much, like it's expected.
Yeah.
But for her doing the show, having an anomaly means ghosts are real. Like that's what people who believe are going to think. Oh, the person with the PhD could not disprove it. It's a ghost. Like that's all the proof they need, right?
Yeah. I mean, at the end of the day, it just makes the science still not interpreted as science, right? Like I think people who are going to come in with that belief, they're going to be skeptical of what the person who claims to be this kind of fact-based scientist, they're going to be skeptical of that person anyway. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So it kind of, how do I want to put it? Yeah, it just like kind of puts the science in a position that it's not supposed to be in. Like the science can't always like prove something. I would say most of the time science isn't even proving something anyway. It's just trying to make connections and like suggest that things might be true or suggest that things might work in a certain way, but proof is like really hard. So, but I don't think people see science that way. I think people see science, especially in popular culture, as like it is or it isn't, and that's all there is. But it's obviously much more complicated than that.
Right. I think Kevin notes science is also a type of like faith, which is kind of accurate. Like you don't actually know anything until you like experience it yourself, and even then everything is like referential. But it just made me think of like things being kind of proven and replicated. That's very important. Like the replication of data is so important. That's kind of what makes fact, right? But even then, things could be proven like 10 different ways, and if people don't want to believe it, they won't believe it.
Right. But I mean, to be fair, like it is how I would treat like the revelation that ghosts exist. I think if like people came out with like this video, that video, like here's all this evidence for like why ghosts exist and how we know, I think I'd be pretty darn skeptical myself until I saw something concrete myself. Not that I'd want to, but I can understand the skepticism. I mean, for me, like I don't know, I've always been a sciencey person. I understand why we should believe science and to what degree we should believe scientific revelations too, right? But but I don't I couldn't see myself necessarily applying that to ghost hunting even with the same evidence. So I don't know. I can understand why someone might be on the other side of that.
Yeah, I think it's also just so much easier to craft information or like to fake information.
Yeah.
It's a little spooky. But yeah, for ghost hunting, I don't think it'll ever be proven unless it's like if something happens like Ghostbusters level, like insanity takes over a city.
Right.
But even then, you'd have people on the other side of the country saying that didn't happen. So
right, exactly.
I don't know.
Yeah.
But we kind of went away a bit there.
Yeah.
But it's fine. We've all read this.
Yeah, it's okay.
We should talk about like the team though and kind of set them up. So Fade to Black, it's the skeptic versus the believer basically. Although Claire is the one basically doing all of the work, I think, as the skeptic. Even though like proving it should be on the side of the paranormal investigators, but instead she has to disprove it, which I think is a very unfair angle to work at it from. We have Matt, who's leading the team basically, who is married to Claire. He's the one that's been interested in ghosts like all of his life because he had a experience as a child, the classic, saw a ghost as a kid, they were best friends, blah blah blah.
It was kind of a lot. Yeah, it was more than just saw a ghost. they were chilling.
Yeah, they were friends. I did make a note of like how many times a character went through a big change or like a traumatic event and then experienced the paranormal. And it happens a fair amount, I think, because even if Matt wasn't in like a super intense environment, he had just moved, I think, pretty far. And his mom seemed weird.
Yeah.
Like he mentioned she would get like these angry eyes or something. I don't remember exactly, but there was definitely something going on that was strange about their relationship. But yeah, I don't know if it was as far as what happened with Jake, the cameraman, but
right, yeah. Everybody
has a little bit of something going on, I think.
I didn't even think about that with Matt, honestly. That's a good point. I was like, what trauma did he experience? But I guess if you're relating the closeness of that event to him having just moved,
Yeah.
I think it is also, I mean, it's an interesting point that this ghost was, like, it came to be from a relationship his mother had, right? Like, a friend from his mother's childhood that then came and kind of followed him. So it's interesting to look at it from the trauma point, but really his mom is the one who brought this ghost around.
Right.
And that's obviously from a major trauma of its own,
Yeah, because she felt a lot of guilt, I think, about it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's an interesting point. I mean, if the paranormal is real within this book, then that would make sense from the mom's perspective for the ghost to be around. But, that's Matt. He and Claire met in college, ? Or while she was in college, ? Something. They met. And then Claire is the one with the PhD, who I think deserves better. She kind of was interested in that intensity, though, that Matt had, so she would, help him out. And basically, what we need to know about this couple is this show is very much Matt's dream. Or not necessarily this show. Ghost hunting is Matt's dream. Right. It's what he wants to do. Claire is there to support him, for the most part, at least in the beginning of this book. But she has basically been living to support him. And as soon as that's flipped, Matt does not treat that the same way.
Yeah.
He gets a little bit jealous, and he's kind of, I have no thoughts. Head empty.
I feel like the reason why this relationship works is because of the sort of people that Matt and Claire are. Like, it seems like Claire is very much willing to give a lot into a relationship, simply because she loves him, right? Like, she's willing to entertain him and, lean into the sort of uniqueness that Matt has. And I think Matt really benefits from having a partner who supports him, right? Like, he wouldn't be able to be with a partner who is, so skeptical that they don't entertain it at all, right? Like, Claire is skeptical, but she entertains it for sure, right? Like, she's willing to kind of set those things aside and say, or even bring her scientific aspect into it, right? To support a project. Matt, I think he's not looking for someone to be the same person as him, right? Otherwise we wouldn't have Claire, but he's definitely looking for active support. And I think it's a very, I think he knows that what he's doing and what he believes in is on shaky grounds. And so it's super fragile, right? Like, the moment that things start to seem a little shaky with Claire on the show, Matt kind of starts having the nightmares, and like it's just he is very fragile about that, because he knows it's not like a widely accepted, like, reputable field for him to be in. But up until this point, he's received the support from Claire. So I don't know. To me, I actually think that it makes sense that they're together. It's just a shame that it is so fragile. His feelings are so fragile because he does get shaken up pretty easily.
Right. Yeah, I think Claire makes it clear in her journals that she does want to believe in things, and I think that helps their relationship. Like, she puts a lot of faith in Matt, I think, but she just can't, like, believe herself because there's, like, no evidence of anything. She's never had an experience. She was raised in, like, a very skeptical household, I think she mentions. Like, she is willing to go along with what he wants because I think she finds that type of passion attractive. But, yeah, you're right. She notes their dynamic works because she's the more, like, stoic one and kind of more, like, supporting his passion, but it doesn't work the other way. Or it doesn't work when they're both passionate about it, I guess.
Yeah, I think that's maybe what it is. Yeah.
Yeah, which is kind of, it's like, sad.
This is Matt's thing, right?
Right.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah, so marital issues, basically, to sum up what's going on there. Both before the event and after the event.
It could be worse, though. Yeah, I think there's nothing unreasonable here, though. And I don't think it's anything that couldn't be worked out. It makes sense for Claire to be in a mood about this all, and Matt maybe makes a little sense for him to be in a mood, but it makes sense in that it lines up with his character and based on the sort of special treatment he's gotten for this interest of his for so long, to have that get, I don't know, taken away a little bit from him. I understand why he's upset about it, but he does need to, they need to figure it out, though. Like, I don't think they can't, but they definitely need to talk about it.
Yeah, I'm just worried it's gonna, like, persist throughout the entire book, and it's just gonna make me dislike Matt totally so much. Because it's so annoying of him, like, to be upset that she's finally passionate about what she's doing. I don't know. It just reeks of, like, the man in the relationship being taken care of. And like, yeah, it's like, okay,
totally babied, so.
Right, and like, okay, but what about Claire? Like, she got a PhD for a reason. She's obviously passionate about certain things, but she's put a lot of that on hold, or probably even for a while assumed she would never get to it because she wanted so badly to make Matt happy. So, I don't know.
No, I agree with you. I think it's the sort of, I've been getting this feeling from more than just Matt. I think I'm getting it from the people on the show in general, but Claire is there for a reason, and no one wants her to do it. It's like, right. I think Matt doesn't want it because he might say he does, but it's like at the end of the day, now she's getting the opportunity to, like, really lean into it, and it's like, oh, actually, I don't want that. So I just think it was such a, I think, major sacrifice for Claire to get involved with the show to begin with. This is like the ultimate show of support, and then she's being, like, kind of bullied for doing it, and it's like she's not able to engage in the science fully when that is literally the reason she's on the show to begin with. Like, now is her time to shine and let her do it.
Yeah, you kind of mentioned her being, like, villainized by the editor, but yeah, even, like, in universe, she feels herself like she is playing the villain, and she doesn't want to do that. Like, she doesn't want to crush about people.
It, right? Like, yeah, like, it sucks being the person whose whole job it is to kill everyone else's dreams.
Right.
It's like sad.
Yeah, and Kevin, who used to be a cop, now is the tech guy, is, yeah, him and Claire do not get along, really. I don't think Claire gives Kevin any thought, to be honest.
Yeah, I don't think so.
But Kevin fucking hates Claire. Because Kevin is the worst character in this book.
It's funny, though, because you get all these moments of, like, Kevin being like, maybe Claire and I aren't so different. And I think that's a little bit true. I don't think they're actually that different, but Kevin just is a lot more annoying about it all.
Right. Yeah, because he wants to be important in the show, and he feels like he's gotten sidelined, kind of. Because him and Matt kind of go back to before the show. Let's just set up some backstory. Used to be a cop. He got a divorce. He killed someone on the job. And then he thought he saw a demon. Boom, trauma. And then a paranormal experience.
Lots of it, yeah. Yeah.
And now he's kind of like the big, tough, like, paranormal investigator who thinks he's so important within this show and like how it works. And he wants to be an investigator instead of just a tech guy. But honestly, I fucking hate his ass. He thinks so much of himself.
Yeah, he does. Yeah, go ahead, sorry.
No, it's okay. He's just he thinks he's so smart, and he thinks he's either at Claire's level or above her level, just from the paranormal side. But even when they're talking after they get like the footage of the tall woman, and Claire is like, she showed us exactly what we wanted to see. It's an invitation. Kevin is like, I don't think that's right. And Claire's like, okay, prove me wrong. And he's like, he thinks about it and he's like, actually, she was right. And I'm like, okay, then shut your mouth. Like, right. Just shut your mouth. Like, you do not know. He's so quick to like disagree and think he knows what's going on. He does not know what's going on. He is, and he's like, he's so creepy because he like likes Jess.
Oh my god, yeah.
And Jess is the actress of the group, like put in by the producers, and I think it's actually mentioned in the book that she is basically the diversity hire, and I was like, holy shit, that's crazy.
Yeah. It was a bit direct about it, yeah.
Yeah, but Kevin definitely has a thing for her, and I'm like, he is old enough to like be her father. Like, please stop. That's so creepy.
It just with the line where he's like, I stared at Jess a little bit on the camera. Like in his journal entry.
My God,
I was like,
it's
do you hear yourself? Oh my God.
So ick. So ick.
It is very ick.
The only interesting thing Kevin does, and the producers note this too, is Kevin fakes evidence.
Yeah.
And not even like in a small way. They have this like trigger board where ghosts could like move something, and then they'll see if something is moved through the night. And everything's moved. And him and Claire had just spoken, because Claire is like, you need to help Matt, like, save the show, like, figure the show out, like, because they want to keep going with the show, but Claire doesn't want to be there, like, they need to change things. And as soon as Claire said, help Matt, and Kevin was like, I want to be more important, I was like, oh, okay. I know what happened here. Like, as soon as they woke up that morning and the board was moved, I was like, fucking Kevin. He fucked some shit up, and he did.
I'm glad you figured it out that quick. I actually thought it was Claire at first, because I was like, she's desperate for something to be different. Maybe she's just gonna like tamper with it to like make Matt feel better, and I was gonna hate it. I still did hate it, but now it's Kevin. I hate it. So
yeah, I was like, Claire is too her like guns. Like Claire would not fuck with evidence just for the sake of Matt. Like, even throughout all of this, I think she's stayed very true to, like, her scientific principles. Kevin, though, he'd fuck some shit up. And then he
has no principles, really.
I know. He feels bad about it. He's like, oh, I don't deserve to be called a hero, but, like, I did what was right for the show. And I was like...
That drove me nuts.
He so badly wants to be known as a hero. Like, he is desperate for it. Like, fuck you.
The fact that he even says that, he's like, first he says, this hurt me more than anyone else. And I'm like, no, you hurt Matt more than anyone else. You can sit down. You hurt Matt, not yourself. Yeah, you did hurt your reputation, but you didn't hurt yourself. You know, like, that was just crazy. And then, yeah, on top of that, he wants to be like, oh, I thought maybe I'd be a hero. And it's like, so are you sympathetic to what you did wrong or not? I don't think you are. But it's just ridiculous. And then he has the nerve to call himself an empath. Oh my god.
Oh my, I literally saw that line where he called himself an empath, and I was like, oh no, he's a psychopath. Like,
I think he thinks he's like a medium or something, because he really is like, let me do what I do best. And what he does best is like move around a room and see what he feels, right? Like, I think he thinks he's got like a special paranormal connection because he saw that demon. Or at least because he thinks he saw that demon, which I also have feelings about.
Yeah, definitely not a demon, by the way. Like, just a poor abused woman, but whatever. Right. Yeah, he definitely thinks, because he's all about basically being the opposite of Claire. Like, he's like, oh, you have to just experience it. You can't test it. Like, you can't get evidence for the paranormal. It's just a feeling. And I'm like, great, but that doesn't make television. Well, I guess sometimes it does. You're just gonna
tell the world. Yeah, I think it does. It's just you're gonna go tell the world, like, I felt something. Ha ha ha! It feels so good to feel something. Now the whole world will believe me. Like, he's got nothing. He's got nothing. He should just be going in, like, walking around like abandoned homes by himself.
Right.
That would be the same effect to what he's trying to do.
The only two things he kind of does is, the first is he notes the house gets quiet. which I actually picked up on pretty early. Like, the lack of sound was very telling that something was going on to me. And Kevin does make note of that, which I think was pretty smart.
It was super emphasized in the text, so.
Yeah, it's been possible not to pick it up, to be honest. The second thing is, when he's in the basement, he does note the well. But also, that's a pretty obvious thing of something's going on. Obviously, you know, you drift towards the well. He says it's a feeling. I say, you've read what happened at the house, probably. And he almost goes into the well alone. He's like, I'm going to be the hero of the group. I'm going to go in alone. And Jake's like, that's kind of insane, but go ahead. And I thought he was
going to die there.
I thought he was going to do it and fucking die. And then he chickens out because he's actually a coward. Like,
well, yeah, because this whole thing is talking big game.
Yeah, absolutely.
And they call him out on it all the time. Like, you talk big game, but like, what do you actually do? And what does he actually do? Right? Like,
he doesn't do anything.
He can't do anything. Yeah.
But yeah, he's interested in Jess and then seems to hate fucking everybody else on the show, to be honest.
He's so lucky Matt brought him along, honestly.
I know. There's also such a weird moment with him and Jake. Him and Jake don't really get along either, but Jake is like my favorite, maybe my second favorite after Claire. And Kevin is like, do you have a knife on you? And Jake's like, yes, it's kind of useful in these scenarios, which makes sense to me. You're in abandoned houses. I think it makes sense. And Kevin's like, I think, or maybe Jake's like, do you want to see it? And Kevin's like, if you pull it out, I'll show you my like 8mm or something. I'm like, what the fuck? Like, what a weird thing for Kevin to say. I guess not.
Do we know what chapter this happened in?
Okay, it's on, oh gosh, about page 130, 131. Yeah, he asks, like,
oh my god. Yeah,
you wouldn't happen to own a knife, would you? And I'm like, okay, maybe Kevin needs a knife or something. Makes sense. And then Jake's like, yep, do you need it? And then Kevin's like, if you want to see my 9, by all means, take it out. And I'm like, what the fuck? You asked. Like, you literally asked if he had it. But I think it's Kevin, like, sizing people up for some reason, which makes me so nervous.
I feel like he's like, oh, like it comes down to weapons, right? Like, this person has a weapon on him, so I have a weapon on me. So that way, if he tries to pull his weapon on me, I can pull my weapon on him, and my weapon is stronger, right? Like, it is a sizing up. It's disgusting because, like, what's the point? And like, I think there's like the whole weird thing too of like when he has that second interaction where he's like, well, I think this is the demon interaction actually, where he's like, should I kill her too? Like, I've already killed one person, you know. Like, there's definitely a bad vibe about all that.
Yeah, it makes me nervous for what's going to happen in the second part, because it feels like very Chekhov, like, why bring this up, that they have these things? I feel like something possibly accidental is going to happen, but if Kevin does end up killing somebody, he'll probably try and justify it as, like, they were possessed, like, something had happened, blah, blah, blah. And it's also possible within the realm of this book that they'll leave that up for debate. Like, was that person possessed or not? Like, I don't know.
I can see him like going for one of the paranormal entities with a gun, and that's how it happens. Like, that's how he ends up shooting someone. Like, he's like, I was trying to protect us. Like, I was defending us. And everyone's like, you shot a gun at a ghost. You know, you killed someone. So,
yeah. You know. Yeah, it just makes me nervous. Okay, so that's Kevin. There's a lot. I'm concerned for what's going to happen with him, to be honest.
I will say, though, the thing that I find similar about Claire and Kevin is, like, their extremism, right? Like, Kevin, like, being unwilling to listen to scientific devices, even though, like, having a full disregard for them is unnecessary, right? But then there's one scene that I wanted to bring up with Claire where it's like the rustling starts in the house, like they can hear movement in the walls, and Jessica's like, what the heck is that, you know?
Oh, and yeah, she like, calls it like settling.
Yeah, she's like, oh, that's just like sounds that old houses make. Like, that really knocked down scientific integrity like 10 notches for me when she said that. Because I'm like, you mean to say like your whole job here is to like do the science, and like you were just given something to investigate and you're not going to go investigate it, you're just going to brush it off? Like, it's the same problem as the ghost hunters. Like, they're looking for anything to signify ghosts, and you are willing to brush off things that could be signified. Like, your whole job is debunking, right? So go debunk that thing. Don't just brush it off. You didn't debunk it when you brushed it off. So I don't know. I think they are quite similar in their sort of temperament about it.
Yeah, it was like very dismissive, but I think it is very easy in like those old houses or old buildings to be like, oh, it's something settling, something fell. Like,
Right.
it's just such a quick answer, but it is a bit almost lazy of her, I think.
Yeah. In that context, it matters, right? Yeah, I get it. The old house probably is making some of those sounds, probably are settling sounds, but I'm guessing not all of them are based on what we know now, so it was worth investigating.
Yeah. And for Jess, we kind of mentioned her a bit. The actress of the group wants to make her big break. I think.
Good luck with that.
I know. I think she's a terrible mother, quite to the point.
Just out with it, yeah.
Yeah, she's like, oh, I have to chase my dream. So her kid is basically staying with her mother, or their grandmother. She's like, I have to chase my dream. Like, it's like being on a plane. Like, when you get oxygen, you have to put the mask on yourself first before you give it to somebody else.
I was going to bring up that same quote.
That analogy does not make any fucking sense. Like, this is not an emergency. This is just your life.
No, this is parenting. Yes.
Yes, it's parent. If you have a child, and yes, you do that on a plane when it's like crashing. This is not that. This is you wanting to be an actress and deciding to like leave your kid to do that. Like, at some point, like, having dreams is good, right? But at some point you gotta stop or you gotta do something else.
Here's my thing, like, she can go ahead and pursue her acting career, but not with the strategy she has. Like, if the strategy is, this is me putting my oxygen mask on, so I'm just going to leave my kid behind and do like whatever to make my career happen, I don't think that's quite the same approach as, I'm doing this to make sure like my kid is taken care of, and when I'm not there, I'm also making sure my kid is taken care of. I don't have to have my sister pestering me to make sure that I'm thinking about my kid, right? Like, it is the sort of mindset that she has about it, where she's not really thinking about her kid enough. She's just thinking about him in theory, right? Like, of like, this is just me thinking as a mom as opposed to me being a mom, right? It's okay for her to pursue a career. I just think the sort of approach she has to parenting itself is wrong, and the reason why she's doing this sort of pursuit, this particular job, is not sound.
Right. Because it's also like, she leaves, right? When the event happens, she runs off, and I'm like, perfect, get out of there. Like, you have a family, go.
Right. Yes. Yeah.
And then she comes back, and her justification is like, something big is going on. Like, we need to figure out what's happening. Like, this is bigger than us. Like, blah blah blah. I'm like, okay, maybe, possibly, but also it's not. Like, even if you have this book which proves everything that happened in some kind of capacity, does it actually prove, like, is it knowledge that's valuable at all?
Right.
Maybe, but is anybody going to take it seriously? Probably not. And also, what is you being there doing for the group?
For the group, nothing.
For the group, nothing. You have no specification within this field. You are the actress. Even when Matt is listing off having everybody together, he's like, Jake, our fly on the wall. Claire, our scientist. Kevin, tech guy. And he's like, Jess, a beautiful smile. I'm like, oh, okay. Like, I just feel like in this scenario, and maybe this is just me, but even if I found out something crazy like this had happened, I would still leave. If I had a child, I would, and I was like raising that child basically alone. Like, it's not like she has a partner, right? It's just her, right, technically. Even if she has, you know, her mother and her sister and all of that.
Family, yeah.
If it was just me raising this kid as their only actual parent, I'd be like, okay, you guys, one of you had the PhD, like, you have more going on than I do. I'm gonna...
You got this.
I'm gonna... yeah, I'm out of here. I have a family to think about. And maybe that's not very, like, scientifically, like, progressive of me, I guess, because I'm not willing to make that sacrifice, but I don't know. That's just my opinion.
I think you're doing the right thing to put yourself in the shoes of, like, a parent, though, right? Like, Matt and Claire are not that. And I mean, we see towards the end of this, like, Matt is very willing to put his life on the line to figure out what's going on here. And I don't think Jessica should be so willing to do the same thing. So it would have made sense for her to stay out. And, like, I guess it's, like, cute where she's like, I want to go back and, like, help out. And, like, there's something happening here. But it's like, don't make a decision on whether or not it's wholesome and cute for you to go and reunite with your team. Make a decision based on the fact that you have a child to raise and your family is taking care of him for you right now. So you should really think about getting back to them and relieving them of a duty that is not theirs, It's just, I don't know. I understand. Like, I want her to find success, and I know that she feels like maybe her acting career is losing opportunity to take off, but I don't know if this is it.
No, because there's also not much gain if you do figure this out. Like, I guess you gain notoriety, but it's not like you then have a job, right?
Yeah. I mean, it doesn't help her be a better actor if it's real.
Right.
And maybe because of the recognition is what she's thinking, right? Like, people will know her because she was on this show, and then she can maybe get opportunities that way. That I could understand.
Yeah, but if this is proven as fact and that's how you gain your notoriety, then that I don't think that helps you as an actress anyway. And if everybody thinks it's fake, then I guess she could use that to further her acting career. But would that be like disingenuous, right? Like, how would that feel? Like, would it feel like a betrayal to your group to use like the sensational paranormal shit going on here and let people think it's fake?
I don't know if that really matters for her though.
I don't know. Well, she cares enough to go back is the point. Like, true. She cares enough about the discovery to go back and offer nothing. Last character, we mentioned him a lot, not that much. There's actually not a lot that happens with Jake. Like, he doesn't even get a voice until a little bit into the book. Mm-hmm. And then his journal even further than that.
Yeah, and he has very few pages of journal entry.
Yes. Jake is, he very much is the cameraman, like, behind the screen. He's not even mentioned in, like, producer notes, really. Or, like, in the magazine review, it's like, this is the team. Jake, not a part of that list. Like, he's not considered part of it, which I think works for him. It's just very interesting to me.
Yeah, I mean, I do think his point, it makes sense because he is the cameraman that he would be so minimally involved. It does seem that now that, like, paranormal things have happened, we're going to get a lot more out of him. I particularly enjoy some of his interactions with Kevin, though. Like, some of the things that he comes at him with, given that Kevin is clearly, like, anti-him. Like, the whole scene where they're, like, in the basement, like, so that Kevin can check out the well, I thought was really entertaining, because it's, like, one part Jake actually supporting him and another part him being like, yeah, Kevin, you're a douchebag. Like, he's pretty clear about it. And then I think his very first journal entry also really got me. He, like, just dives into this person likes that person and I like this person.
Honestly,
and it's like, he's like right into the love triangle of it all. Or if that's that's quite a chain, actually, not a triangle at all. But it was just funny the way he laid everything down. I put a note that his first, I could come on this podcast, read Jake's first journal entry, and that would about sum up my feelings on the first 100 pages of the book.
Yeah, I think he's very much like the most show oriented of the group, I think. Because I don't think he cares either way about ghosts until the thing happens, right? Like, this is very much a job for him. It's a gig. And he kind of lives for the drama of it all. Even when they're fighting about Kevin, Matt's like, turn the camera off. And Jake's like, yes, okay. Dude. And he puts it down. And I'm like, oh, bless you. Honestly.
So it was good. It was good.
But, okay. That's the team. That was so long of a conversation about them all. But we also kind of talked about some of the stuff that happened. But in general, okay. So they go to Foundation House in Virginia, which is one of the most, like, weird, haunted, something happened there houses that nobody's ever been able to investigate before. And obviously, from what we talked about before, something does indeed happen. There is the tall woman. But what is the whole thing? Okay. So the house was used as a site for paranormal experiments, basically, in the 70s. Classic. And the project was Project Prometheus. And it used gravity, electromagnetism, music, sound frequencies, and religious symbols, which was a very interesting addition.
Yep.
We get an interview with one of the subjects, Sparling, who is maybe perhaps one of the only subjects still alive, but based on information we get about the subjects, also probably does not think he is alive or exists.
That's a good point.
Because what happened there was basically torturous. It was miserable. Not shocking for the kind of shit that was happening basically in the 70s.
I mean, for so much, like I told you, like the beginning of the book, I thought it was going for that sort of realism thing, and it might like toe the line of whether or not things really happened. I especially felt that because of the way they talked about these experiments, and I was like, oh, they just like literally drove these people to madness, and like that's what these things are, you know?
Yeah, that's what I thought too, because Sparling does mention he was like a drug user, so I thought they might go like an MK Ultra type of route, which MK Ultra was basically like government experiments that tried to use like certain drugs and like torture to like for interrogation methods, like for the most part. I'm basing this off knowledge from another podcast called Red Web where they had an episode about it. Obviously that's not as relevant now because we actually did see paranormal events occur, but like because of like the gravity going on and like the sound frequency, I thought I thought not actual paranormal events were going on.
Right.
Because I also knew something about I didn't know what it was called, but I knew there was a certain frequency that could cause like feelings of dread, and like it can be taken as something paranormal occurring, which apparently it can have a name called the fear frequency. I didn't know about this, but a certain hertz level. It's not the hertz level they seem to use in the experiment though, but I did know that, so I wondered if they were using that frequency to try and push these results. And then I thought maybe the drug use aspect of the experiments just was not listed, but it was still something that was going on that we would find out about. But I don't know about any of that now. It seems like, you know, I mean, we know something was actually going on.
With the frequency thing, I think it's wrong based on some light research, but one thing I was thinking about with the frequency was that they somehow managed to play like his body's fundamental frequency, and that just like sent him into like disarray, you know, because it was causing his body to resonate. I looked it up, and I'm not sure. It seems like maybe it's debatable what the fundamental frequency range for humans is, but they're pretty low because humans are kind of long tubes. So I think it's probably not that based on the numbers they were using, but that was my first thought, was like, oh, like he's just like really resonating, and it's like he's unable to perceive properly around him because of that.
Yeah, like excluding the music they're blasting and the religious symbols, like all of the stuff they're using, the gravity, the electromagnetism, the frequency, all of that can have actual effects on the human body, right? And like perception and everything going on. So in early days, before we knew something was actually happening, I thought they think something is happening because they're fucking with the human body too much, right? They're torturing people, and then they're emitting these waves that are disrupting things, and that's what these experiments are. Like, that's going to be the line we ride throughout this book. But obviously that is not what happens.
Right.
I think also, kind of classic horror trope, we do see a picture of Shiva from like Hindu religion.
Yeah.
And makes sense for the 70s. Like, they fucking love their Eastern religion. And I was like, oh, are we getting the classic horror trope of using like the quote unquote foreign religion as the negative entity going on here? And it still might happen.
I will say I am quite concerned about this feature of the book. I'm hesitant about the inclusion of religious symbols, and
yes,
there's like a whole chart with like all of the different things they tried to say. I guess like there was like religious like prayers and stuff on one page, and yeah, it wasn't giving good vibes. That's all I have to say about that.
Yeah, it did like kind of hit American mysticism where like they were just doing whatever, but having the quote-unquote occult symbols is questionable to me, and along with the Shiva imagery going on. But I guess it makes sense for the 70s, to be honest. For the Shiva picture though, it does change. The third eye like starts spiraling out, and I think that brings up like a very interesting point of this book, which is knowledge. Like what is too much knowledge? And Shiva being known as the Destroyer. Shiva is known as multiple things, but one of them is the Destroyer. Sorry if any of this is wrong. It's been a long time since I studied any Hinduism. But to know so much, especially about like the unconscious and the universe and like everything the third eye represents, I don't see it as, I think Claire sees it as like a black and white. You either know and then are destroyed, or you don't know and ignorance is bliss, which is kind of a view that Claire has had the whole time with like knowledge and suffering. I think it's more gray. Like the destruction part isn't just you die, it's over for you, blah blah blah. I think it's to know too much about the universe and what happens means you're no longer human.
That's interesting. I do feel like that's kind of I'm trying to think of an example, but that's definitely something you see elsewhere where like people kind of like they become enlightened and then kind of ascend, you know?
Yeah. So yeah, I think it's entirely possible the ending of this book will be this group's destruction, or like the ones that go through whatever door has opened, or whoever accepts the invitation, quote unquote, they will no longer be human. Because Matt talks about like humans have a right to know things, and I don't think that's true. I think humans think too much of themselves, and I think there are just some things humans shouldn't know because it changes what makes us human. And I think secrets of the universe, possibly like this and other dimensions and certain godliness, might be on that list.
I agree.
It changes us too much, right?
This is why I say it's like don't tempt the devil, but like it's like knowing too much is its own problem. Like don't ask questions you don't want the answer to. Like you don't know what is going to happen to you until you know what you're trying to learn. And it's the sort of case too, I think generally in horror you see this, right? Of like once you have found out, it is too late for you, right? Like once you can't see the horror of it, like you can't unknow it. Like you're done. Like whether or not you continue to live is out of the question because it doesn't matter anymore.
Yeah. I mean, obviously these scientists wanted to know though, but they also were still pretty okay. I mean, they were assholes, but they didn't want to involve themselves in the experiment as subjects. They still wanted to be slightly objective. Even if stuff like this, it's impossible to be objective, but, you know, whatever.
Is. I know Claire gets so uptight about it when she's reading the files. I think almost too uptight about it, of like, oh, they're not being scientific. And I'm like, this is really like, I don't know what kind of scientist Claire is, but it is certainly not hard science, right? Like this is not, I don't think it's purporting to be hard science. So I feel like to put that expectation and lens on it is just a false equivalency. Like they're doing something totally different.
Right, because the purpose of this experiment is, I think from what I gathered, to try and like tap into another dimension, but they expected that dimension to be empty, and it was not.
Yeah, this part I kind of struggled to understand the interdimensional thing, because it says at some point in time that they shift their research to communication, right?
Yes.
So
yes.
What were they trying to do originally? Like manipulate things? Like what were they trying to do interdimensionally if not communicate with something?
I think they were just trying to prove that there was an alternate dimension.
I was like doing some research on, they mentioned something called interdimensional psychic field theory, which I don't know if this actually exists, but I was able to find a hit for psychic field theory without interdimensional in front of it. That it basically describes like trying to like tap into, I guess, perception and action at a distance. Mm-hmm. So like being able to act on something from a distance, or like being able to sense something without touching it or smelling it, or, you know, typical things, right? I assume that the interdimensional part just comes because they're trying to communicate with the ghost at a certain point. But to me, that seems more like telekinesis and like or like, I guess anything with tele in the front of it, telekinesis, telepath, right? Like they're trying to do things at a distance, and they're using these test subjects because it seems like they might have some sort of innate natural sense towards doing things that other humans can't do, though shaky grounds for that as well. It didn't make a lot of sense for me for that to extend to the ghosts per se, but I guess they were just like, well, there's ghosts, so let's do it.
Okay. For the experiments, though, I did find, I think, the first file about it, or at least where it talks about kind of what's going on 187. It's the statement of purpose, and it seems like, and I hadn't been sure if I'd made this up or not, it's, let me think, my goal is to develop, it's trying to develop paranormal capabilities in humanity using interdimensional psychic field theory, which was pioneered by one of the researchers in this, Roebuck. So it seems like it's trying to use an alternate dimension as a source of energy to then be fueled into people to create psychic abilities, is the vibe. And then obviously that shifts slightly when the dimension they're tapping into isn't empty. There's something in it. So they care more about communicating with that thing.
Right.
And I guess basically at this point using their subjects as kind of a bridge to try and communicate with whatever that entity is. I think that's what's going on.
Yeah, that makes sense. I wish they were more specific is all.
Yeah, it's such small snippets of information, I think, that it's difficult. And we actually don't have that much of the actual research. Like, we have a later note from Gloria about what's going on, kind of.
Mm-hmm.
But we don't have much information about the subjects themselves and the multiple tests they went through. We kind of get summations of those things.
Right.
So, we're not getting that much. So yeah, you had mentioned interdimensional psychic field theory, right?
Yeah, because that's where they mentioned it.
So yeah, it is using that. It's just, it didn't go how they expected, and then they shifted the experiment.
Right.
As needed.
I also thought it was interesting that the researchers were, I suppose, doing this for the human potential movement. I thought it's like an interesting conclusion, especially as Claire points out, since later down the line it is, I don't even know if it's later down the line, but it was never true, right? Like the whole like humans using 10% and like the rest of it, using 10% of your brain and potentially the rest of it being able to use for psychic or higher level abilities that we don't use it for. So it's interesting that it's so based on that, because I wonder where that goes once they start getting these sort of connections, right? Like, are they feeling like, oh, it is the other 90%? Like, we are getting like tapping into that, or like, what point do they figure out like that was, or if ever, do they figure out that that's not what's happening here, and it must be something not so human centric?
Yeah, I think we get a clear image of that with like the Shiva third eye thing going on,
right?
That it is very much not human. I think they start to get that idea when they actually have like an entity. Right? Because it must be, they like celebrate it as this woman is having a breakdown, right. But they must see it as some kind of like godly figure, right? Like they have tapped into some other plane of existence. They would probably assume something more celestial, right?
I mean, they definitely think they've tapped into something. I wasn't super sure at that point that they were certain of it being another being, though.
Well, they saw the hand.
Oh yeah, sorry. I thought you were talking about like when they have the one subject who has like an episode and like has like a conniving smile on her face.
Is that not when they see the hand?
Is that not the same? I thought maybe it is the same one.
It's during the home video thing. Oh, we don't actually see, because it cuts to a man spinning. It cuts to the woman like seated, having like thrown up and looking terrible, and everybody else is celebrating, and Gloria with a sign saying we did it, but we don't actually know what they did. Yeah,
I will say though, you're probably still on it though, that's probably what they did just witness. They don't say all that at that point in the book, but they probably did just witness the whole hand situation, similar to what we see at the end of the section we read.
Yeah, because I think it's during the Sparling interview when he mentions like the hand coming up and like that part of the experiment. So, yeah, I don't know in the timeline when that occurred, if the woman was the first one to experience that or not.
I think you're right, though, that they probably are celebrating, like, seeing something beyond a human thing, though, for sure. Like, I think they're already at that point in the research. I think I just didn't realize that at the time that I read it.
Yeah, and then obviously they're celebrating because they don't think about the implications of something like that.
Yeah.
Like, they think it's a cool thing.
Very different approach to the running away from the house entirely approach.
Yeah. I don't know if this book is trying to do this, though. And I think it could just be an effect of the 70s, but I think Claire kind of adds on to this. But it does almost paint, like, the scientists as the negative.
I think so,
like,
yeah.
Obviously we get that perspective with the experiments going on. Like, I think in general, psychological experiments especially were just terrible. Like, if you read any of the histories of them, terrible shit happening during them. And I think for this, it follows that trend. But even Claire, like, she is so similar to the scientific group. It's, like, so ready to experiment and, like, happy to be there, that it almost paints it as, like, they don't care about humanity. They care about the research and, like, what's going on. And I think in this perspective, like, knowing that people died or think they died or have had terrible lives and were experimented on, like, that so clearly paints the scientists in a negative light. And I think it does the same for Claire.
I think it's a little bit different for Claire because I don't think she'd be so willing to just test on someone else. She is definitely willing to put herself out there, though. Like, when they run away from the house and go to the bar, she's like, I don't care what you guys decide, I'm going back. You know, she's like, I'm going back there, whatever you say, even though, like, they were gonna go back too, for sure. But it's a less willingness to put other people on the line and more just for her to witness herself what is going on.
Yeah, I don't even know about that, though, because I think any of them, like, are willing to obviously investigate and try and figure out what's going on. And I think Claire will feed into that and support it so much that it makes her very much like the scientists. Like, if Kevin's like, I'm going to go down this well and figure out what's going on, I think Claire's going to be like, 100% you should go down and you should spin yourself into sickness to figure out what's happening. Like, I think she's close enough to deranged that she would be willing to sacrifice not only herself, which would be fine, but other people.
Yeah, I think she wouldn't exactly advise against it in the way maybe an average person would, but I have to say, though, I don't think that's unique to her. Like, I think the whole vibe right now is doing risky things like that. Like, I think Jake would certainly send him down there. I think Matt might be more hesitant, but would still do it. You know, like, I think they're all willing to put themselves as a group on the line too, but I don't necessarily see Claire being like, she could disprove me, but I don't necessarily see her being like, well, I think Kevin should go do this thing that is super duper risky that I won't do, so that way I can study him doing it.
Yeah, I guess we'll see. I think I just have the feeling she's close enough to that breaking point.
Yeah,
I wouldn't be surprised if she pushed it that far.
I hear you. She is going wild right now, so
yeah. So yeah, research team of the past, they mysteriously disappeared. Sparling was obviously subject Y, I think, with the result of him he has, how do you say it, Cotard's syndrome?
Yeah. Which
basically is the false belief that your body parts are like dead, dying, or don't exist. And he doesn't really believe he exists according to information. And subject Z, believing that she's dead. But subject Z also apparently escaped. There was an interesting note about subject Z biting off 2 of their fingers from the left hand just below the first knuckle, and I was like, oof. That's a lot of... Scientists, like, give a lot of detail like that, but also, I feel like we need to know that. I feel like that's going to come back around.
I think so, too. It was really gross to read, though. I was like, oh, no. Like, we're really just putting this out there.
Yeah. So, yeah, those seem to be the last 2 subjects going on, which would make sense with the lettering if they were the last 2.
Yeah.
And then the researchers themselves disappeared.
And that we have, like, no information about. Like, we just know they disappeared, and, like, that's that.
Right. The assumption that could be made is they went to whatever dimension there was, which I think will tap into some theories. But I think before we finish talking about what happened, the last important thing is Claire is going through all of the files, and she finds like information on a subject A, and we get information on a subject B and a subject C, and subject A is her. It is Claire. And subject B is Jess, and C is Kevin, and then she doesn't get to read anymore about what's going on. So this group was part of the experiment, perhaps even incited the experiments in the past. But the weird thing is, the information on subject A is... Let me find it. It's like written very strangely, and the editor gives interesting details about it. Basically, the editor adds a note saying that no one can understand how the husband and wife team, the Flicks, missing since 1972, could have written the document in Claire's hand. So it's written in Claire's handwriting and also about her, but also attributed to the Flicks, as if they wrote it.
Right. Or as though they are potentially the same
people.
Yeah.
But that kind of... I briefly had that thought, like, this group is going to go back into the past and become the researchers that do the experiments. But the strange thing is, Gloria notes in a note that the characters don't see, but we see. I actually don't know if Gloria mentions it here, but there's, like, disputes about the experiments, and, like, one of the researchers is like, we have to remain objective. We can't start experimenting on ourselves. Like, we have to have that distinction still. So it wouldn't make sense for Claire to be Gloria, but also subject A.
Yeah. Do we think, like, Gloria possessed Claire, and so while she was in the room, she did write those things with her own hand?
Right. That, or I think similar to what you said, Claire writes the note as if she's a subject in the present, and then the note is somehow transported or ends up in the past. And that's how the experiments start. That's why they're the first subjects.
So that you think there might be some sort of time travel aspect to this?
Yes. I mean, it's dimensional travel, so...
The videos exist, right? Like, the videos of the researchers exist. Because we're just seeing the transcripts of them. So, presumably someone would be able to see that they look alike or something, if that were the case, right?
Right, because we even have the home video of the researchers.
Right. Unless that information is just being withheld from us right now.
Yeah, looking at numbers specifically, because I did have this thought, the research team and the fade to black team they don't match.
Right.
Right. Like, the fact that Claire and Matt are married is very interesting with Gloria and Marcus. I did think that was interesting. And then you have Kevin and the Colonel, and I thought, those were interesting. But the only woman in the past is Gloria.
Mm-hmm.
There's not another female researcher. So Jess doesn't fit anywhere.
But I can imagine that not everyone would go back.
But there's also an extra man. So unless Sean is like Sean Roebuck, unless he's an addition to the group because he had his own interdimensional theory, then the numbers wouldn't make sense. And then, Jess would have to be out of the equation. Which, I mean, it is possible, but I don't know.
Interesting. I would say I'm not sold on time travel or anything like that, but it is an interesting thought.
I mean, some kind of travel has to have happened, though.
Because of the paper?
Because of the paper. Unless it is, as Claire suggests, not necessarily that it's a show in a show, like she thinks she's being pranked or whatever.
Right.
But it's possible the entity is creating information. This actually might be a good idea. The first time the entity shows up, it's when everybody is angry at Kevin and, like, everything is so tense and, like, terrible. So it's possible that the entity is replicating that kind of tension and created this information about Claire and the group, trying to stir up trouble.
That's an interesting point. Because it's right before midnight that this comes out, right? And so they're all arguing again when the stuff starts happening again.
Mm-hmm.
That's a good point. I think Claire is maybe like, I mean, there must be a reason why this is all included, but it does feel like Claire is much too obsessed with, like, conservation of energy. Like, if there's writing, then, like, it must have gotten its energy from somewhere to, like, make this, and, like, it must have some sort of mass that it pulled, like, in order to create this sheet of paper, and, like, there's just, like, a lot of obsession with, like, this couldn't exist unless energy was conserved. And I'm like, this is a mystical. It's like almost like what Kevin would say. Like, we're a little bit past physics at this point, I think. So I don't know. I think maybe they're doing that because they're going to give us some explanation later in the book of how this all physically makes sense, which I don't think is necessary if they do that. But it could just have been mystically generated. Like, it could be whatever this being is, like, synthesized it and left it to be found by Claire. I don't think it had to have necessarily been written by hand or existed already in the past too. I think it could have just been synthesized.
Right. We also don't know what the entity is capable of or what they're made out of. Like, they're from a different dimension. If we treat it as like a Mothman figure, there's like theories that he's like an interdimensional traveler, whatever. Like, he could have a physical presence, which would be different from a ghost, and be able to interact with things. He could write a note. Or if if this tall woman is more energy based, I mean, they wanted to use the alternate dimension as like a fountain of energy.
Right.
So that doesn't mean this entity is without energy, or like it doesn't have to use the energy of our dimension to do something.
No, that's a really good point. Yeah, if it's supposed to be that the dimension has its own energy that they can pull from, you're not necessarily going to see energy come from your current dimension. Now, that being said, though, when the first haunting happens, they do get all sorts of measurements of temperature dropping and EMF changing and stuff. So there is like effects, but that also doesn't necessarily mean that's because it pulled that energy, or it had to pull that energy to do it. It still could have just pulled energy from its own dimension to make things happen, and those are just side effects.
Right. Also, those readings, Claire mentions like the entity showed us what we wanted to see.
Yeah.
So it's entirely possible all of those readings were created because that is what this team of researchers wanted to see.
Right, like it manipulated the environment so that way it could be seen in those devices.
Yes.
That would make sense.
Yeah. So I think I think it's possible something with time is happening, just because I do think this note is peculiar enough. Like, something else could have been created to create tension, I think, rather than this. I think the Fade the Black team having, like, being subjects does have to do with the past somehow. Like, some kind of bootstrap paradox thing going on. But I don't know. Because thinking of it as, like, a time thing going on, then the result of this book would then be Fade to Black disappears.
Right.
Because they end up somewhere else.
Yeah.
And that's the conclusion of this book. Which would make sense, like, cyclically. Like, the research team disappeared, this team disappeared, like, what happened? Nobody knows.
Yeah,
like,
and then it becomes its own mystery.
Yeah, that could be a thing. But I think it's also entirely possible another direction it could go is more true crime, like Kevin kills everyone in the house and
right.
Nobody knows what happened. Like, it could go so many different directions in regards to it being a mystery. It's hard to say.
It's interesting because there must be a reason within this world that this book gets released, right? Like, there must be a reason why these transcripts and very personal journal entries are released to the public. So yeah, it can help you theorize, like, I mean, like, yeah, it's very possible that these people just don't even exist at the end of the story, because who would really let their journal entries out like that? Looking at you, Jake. Like, who's just going to put that out into the world for all the other people who are on that show with you to read, let alone the public? So it's possible that these people disappear for sure. And maybe that it will feel a little mystery, right? It's possible that it's unresolved, and part of this book being released is that the Foundation House continues to be a mystery in which another group of people disappeared.
Yeah. I mean, the time thing and, like, the experiments, it's also interesting because the project is called Project Prometheus, and the story of Prometheus is something Claire brings up when she's talking about knowledge is suffering. Like, she makes a lot of allusions like that, which could be coincidence, like academics, love their fucking Greek shit, But, I don't know.
Should we talk more about what happened that first haunting night?
With the tall woman showing up?
Yeah. I'm particularly curious. So we mentioned the Shiva and the tall woman. There's also, like, things flying around the room, which is, I'm not sure there's much to say about that. But the other thing I was curious about that I think is worth mentioning is that the stairs get crushed, and there's, like, this whole thing of, like, Claire being like, it would have taken like 1,000 pounds of force to, like, do this to these stairs. And while I'm not crazy on the force thing, it is very different than everything else that happens in the haunting, or everything else that seems to happen in this house seems to be very human focused, but then this either human or occult, but this doesn't really seem like either of those. Like, it seems very different, like this massive weight crushing the stairs, like almost something really heavy going down them or something. And they don't really address it anymore after. I mean, they look at it the next day, and then Kevin like literally just says the same thing Claire does, but in front of the camera, like, which is annoying. But they don't really actually get anything else out of it. So I'm kind of curious what else that could be. Like, what would be so massive or so strong, or what point would it be trying to make by crushing the stairs?
Well, they were all at the top of the stairs at the time, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So it's possible that it was just like getting rid of an escape route,
yeah, like trapping them.
Right, because the tall woman does she extend her hand in this scene?
I believe so.
I think so. Or at the very least, something is seen as an invitation. Like she's offering them something. So the stairs breaking could be like a hint that this entity is not as kind. Like, yeah, it's an invitation, but also, it's also I think what you said, like, you can't unring a bell, you can't undo something, like, you will not turn back. Like, you, at the end of all of this, you are going to be with me, wherever that is. That could be, like, why the stairs break.
That would make sense. Yeah, it just, to me, it, like, felt like something different. You know, like, it just felt like, I couldn't name what it could possibly be, which is why I brought it up, but it just felt like, wow, like, that's really, like, it feels just so much heavier than everything else, you know? Where it's like, you know, here's a hand, and there's things flying about, like, that, you know, there's some symbols on the wall. Like, it felt like a different category.
Yeah. Another weird idea could be the stairs breaking could have been something else coming up them.
Right.
Like, we have the apparition room, which is where the tall woman is, but there is something else about the basement, right? Which we haven't investigated that much. So, is it possible that there's actually two entities going on here?
That would make sense.
And we just don't know about it yet.
So the first occurrence happens upstairs, right? And then the second one is in the basement by the well. But they still both, right? Is that correct?
I don't think anything has happened at the well yet, though. Has it?
I thought that, like, in this very end scene, they were down. I'm also maybe not sure where the well is. I think I kind of thought it was in that same, like, basement room of interest.
It's in the basement, yeah, but I think they were planning to investigate the well, but they hadn't yet.
But I thought Claire was looking down the well when this happens. Like, I think, like, they walk down there, and Matt is like, are there any spirits? And she's like, shut up, and then, like, walks up to the well and looks right down it, and then this all happens.
You're right. Yes, let me see if I can find it. Oh, yeah, there's the music that starts off that Kevin knows again. He knows the song, which might be sus.
It might be sus, but it also kind of maybe makes sense if he's just an older fellow.
Older. They're all blaming each other.
Yeah, so the wisp of music begins on 236.
Yeah, the music isn't coming from upstairs this time. It's in the basement. Claire is going down to see.
Oh, yeah, there's the screw this. That's what she says. And she strides straight to the well and shines a flashlight down into its depths. Her face goes slack.
And she says, you're not real. So she sees something.
Yes. But I think there's a hand.
Oh, and there's a hand.
Yeah, so there's still, like, the hand happens twice, right? Because it does happen in the other one as well. And so that makes me think it's the same entity. Like, it's related to the woman. If it's not the embodied woman herself, then it's at least related.
This one isn't gendered, though. Is it?
It might not be. I just kind of figured because it was the same hand thing.
It is another hand thing.
And especially because when Sparling, was that it?
Sparling, yeah.
He mentions his experience with the hand of being, like, he describes it as, like, thin, like a woman's hand, is what he says. So I just figure it's all, like, the same woman's hand.
It might be. Claire actually touches the entity in this.
Yes.
And then she starts to laugh and has a bit of a breakdown. Okay, so yeah, it could be the same entity, but it could also be a different entity.
I almost want to believe that there's more than one entity, especially because of, like, I don't know, like, the song choice. Like, I should have listened to these songs, but I didn't. But it is clear in at least this one, but I think both of them, that there's a group of people singing the song. Like, it says singers, female singers, right? So, not that a single entity couldn't do whatever it wanted with making this music happen, but it does almost imply to me, like, there's a group on the other side of this that is causing this to happen, and we are inviting you to become part of this group of supernatural entities.
Right. Also, Roebuck's note at the very end before day 4, it's the gods demand an offering.
Yeah, that's a good point.
To learn and love, we must offer. So
it's interesting that it's the gods too, right? We've gone beyond calling them a being, an entity. Like, he thinks they're gods. And I don't love that it's we must offer. What do we offer?
Yeah, I'm just assuming some kind of sacrifice.
Yeah.
Probably human, to be honest.
I would assume so. Assume that there's a reason the humans disappeared, you know?
Mm-hmm.
Did we want to say anything else about the second haunting event?
I mean, we don't really get... Nothing breaks, I guess, is the only thing to mention with that one, right?
Right.
Like, nothing physically happens. Claire, we don't know if she saw or experienced anything yet.
Right. I mean, she definitely touched that hand. So there's that. I want to know what she saw, right? Like, what did she see when she looked down that she was immediately stunned, right?
Yeah.
Like, what is down there? Like, Kevin needs to go down there. I want to know. Because I also want to know what it looks like normally, right? Like, what does it look like to be down there during the inactive hours of the house?
Yeah, because consistently things happen at midnight, which, very interesting, midnight.
Yeah, I was wondering, I mean, there's definitely a pattern, but I wasn't sure what the point of it being midnight was.
Yeah, I was expecting, like, 3 a.m. witching hours type of situation.
Yeah.
But midnight, maybe because it's, like, the crossing of a day.
Yeah. It's interesting to think that all those kids would, like, party in there and stuff, because they would be there at midnight, no doubt.
That's crazy, yeah.
Right? So, it doesn't necessarily guarantee that these entities were active, but they wanted to be, they could have been while these literal children were there. And it doesn't sound like any of them disappeared.
Yeah, it might play into, like, the grayness of the entities. Like, they might just be givers of knowledge in a certain sense. So the kids wouldn't be interested in anything like that.
That's a good
So there
point.
would be nothing to show them.
That's a good point. They're not there for that. And especially since it talks about what you said earlier of, like, the ghost is showing us what we want, what it wants us to see, right? Like, I don't think it wants the kids to see anything. I don't think it cares.
Yeah. Other theories, though, I think basically, theory-wise, I don't really have a clear idea of what is gonna happen. I think the beginning of this book, starting with, like, the mystery of a disappearance and an ending with the disappearance of this group, makes sense. The most sense, maybe. But I wouldn't be surprised if one of the groups stayed behind and was blamed in some kind of true crime fashion.
Mm-hmm.
I feel like that's how a situation like this could go. But I don't really have anything concrete. Just because it's so fictitious what is happening, it's hard to really figure anything out.
Truly. Yeah, because it could go any direction. I have a few ideas about certain things that I think will happen. I definitely don't think I could predict the end of this book. One thing I kind of think might happen, I definitely think someone's going to die, like, just to be clear. I think someone's not making it to the end of this book, and not just because they went back in time or something. My prediction is Kevin, though, because he is by far the most reckless. So I know we've talked about, like, he might shoot someone because he talked about the gun, and yeah, I still think that's possible, but I think just based on the information we have about their behavior so far, Kevin seems most likely to get himself killed, or get anyone killed, but I mean himself too. So my prediction is Kevin on not making it to the end. I think there's a pretty good possibility of Claire and Matt getting into a significant argument and one of them potentially storming off.
Yeah. Like, do you think... I wonder if Matt will be the one to say, this is enough.
I think it might.
It is time to go, and Claire will be too much all in to make that call.
I think that's accurate, because Claire is going so into it, right? This is what makes me think if someone disappears for not dying reasons, it's gonna be Claire, because she's gonna be so into it that she's just gonna be like, I want to know more. I'm going to do whatever it takes to know more, even if it means I cease to exist in this world.
Yeah. Also, Matt describes their group as a family. I think if anybody got hurt or actually died, I think that would be the wake-up call. Like, yeah. We got the video evidence. It's something is going on, but also it's different to say we would sacrifice our lives to figure this out, and then somebody actually dying or getting hurt, and you're kind of like, would you actually, like, you know, like, it's a different vibe, I think.
Yeah, once it gets real.
Once it actually happens. Mm-hmm. And that's, like, the difference between, I think, the knowing too much. Like, at some point you know too much where empathy just disappears. Mm-hmm. And that's when you start to lose humanity. And I think Claire will go down that route, and Matt will still hold on to that humanity aspect.
I agree, and that's going to be real sad if that happens. Yeah, I feel like I have a soft spot for Matt. I know I kind of got on his case with his being maybe a bit sensitive about Claire's actions, but he is, how do I put it? And I think he's like emotional and caring, right? Like he is into the whole family thing, and he continues to include Kevin even though he doesn't deserve it, right? I think he tries to value everyone, which is a valuable leadership quality for someone who could just do what everyone else is doing and focus on his own desires and what he wants and how he thinks things should go. But he is flexible with other people, even if it leads to a little bit of resentment towards Claire.
Yeah, because Jake thinks Jess is in love with Matt, but she describes it as she looks up to him so much.
Right.
And Matt really does look after her and help her.
Right, because she feels included, even though she was never involved with this stuff the way that the rest of them were.
Yeah, and he didn't get angry that she wanted to leave. He understood, but he was also happy to have her back.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I think we can forgive Matt for the jealousy because literally they saw something otherworldly.
Yes. Yeah.
It's a little intense right now.
For sure. I would say the last major prediction I would make is that the woman that they are interacting with is not related to the research, by which I mean I don't think we're going to be like, oh, that woman is Gloria, especially because they get the hand in the early research. I don't know if they necessarily get the woman. Is there a moment where they see a whole woman in the research that we know of?
I think the most we understand is information about the Foundation house as a haunting talks about a woman.
Okay.
But I don't know if we get the full woman in the research. Unless that's what Subject Z sees. We don't actually know.
Yeah. So maybe this is less of a prediction and more of something we're kind of figuring out. But I really don't think the woman's going to be like a research subject or Gloria or anything like that. It's really hard to say what it will be given that. I would lean, based on the whole interdimensional thing, that it's just not something we're going to be able to align to humanness. That's my prediction, is it's going to be like a truly otherworldly being that we're interacting with. Yeah, I think that's it. I was also curious if you think there's a chance that the entity could be benevolent, or if you think that's just out of the picture.
I mean, possible. I think it could be benevolent as much as it can't understand human benevolence. It's so much not human, and I think at the very least it might not understand the negative effect it has on people.
Right.
Because I also think every Fade to Black member seems to have a nightmare after the event. Mm. And that could just be trauma response. But I'm also curious if it is an entity invoked type of nightmare. But nightmare to us, maybe showing of something to the entity, right? Yeah. It just might be a different perspective. I think my idea of the grayness, to know everything is to lose, to know too much is to lose that human part of yourself, and to the entity that's not a negative.
Yeah.
That's not something bad. That's just how it is. So I think that would be as far as benevolent as I would go.
I think I'm thinking in the same vein. The reason I thought about this is because of the emphasis on the hand, and especially because Claire touches the hand, and it gave me the sort of it gave me the vibe that this is a hand outreached, right? Like it is an invitation. It's I want you to experience whatever I am, and I'm trying to connect with you, as opposed to I'm trying to inflict something on you, or the stairs is maybe an argument against this, but as opposed to wanting to inflict harm, it almost does seem like it's trying to invite you in for an experience, as opposed to predate on you. So that's kind of why I was thinking maybe at least in its own system is benevolent.
Yeah, I think it's definitely a perception thing. So yeah, we have no clue. Even more than last time. We have I guess last time was pretty okay. This book, nothing.
Yeah, this one's tough.
Just kind of vibing.
Yeah, but I'm really liking it. I've had a great time reading it, and I love the format so much. It really, I don't know. It looks like a big book, but it's not. It's motivating, and it's really easy to read through a lot of this dialogue. So
yeah, it's a fun time. It's a good pick.
And I'm very excited for finding out what does happen. It was Well, as it turns out, I hadn't even read enough. But when I did stop reading where I thought I was supposed to stop reading, I was like, no, I want to read more.
Yeah. Hopefully it won't completely disappoint in the second half. Knock on wood. Basically.
We've been upset before,
I feel like I just spoke that into existence.
How dare you?
I know. I'm sorry.
I did want to make a spooky season recommendation for you and listeners.
Oh?
And I think you might have seen it last time you were at the house here. We have this game called House of Danger, and it's kind of a choose your own adventure storytelling game. So it is like in the style of a choose your own adventure book, but there's, a bit of extra aspects like collecting items, and there's I forget what it's called, like a psychic meter or something like that, like something that like tracks how like sane you are, basically, and how much danger you're in. So there are game aspects as well, but it does greatly center around the choose your own adventure, and it's definitely on the spooky side. So we've only played through, I think, 2 chapters of it so far, and I think there's 5 chapters. It's intended for anywhere from 1 to as many players as you want, because you kind of just sit around a table and read the cards together. So we had a lot of people over when we played it, and it was a lot of fun. So I recommend it.
Awesome. Okay. Spooky recommendations. I didn't think about this. I guess I don't have to give one. Yeah. But if you have a lot of time, Marble Hornets is pretty good.
I thought it might be that.
Yeah, kind of like the original kind of ARG, like, is it real, is it not? Slenderman really popularized that. Mm. I used to watch like I watched that when it was like coming out, which was hell, by the way, because you have to wait months for like new information. And there were like offshoots of it that I kind of watched, but Marble Hornets is like, I don't know, just so well put together, and it's all out now. It's just a really good time.
How many episodes did they end up with?
Oof, I can't even remember.
Because I feel like I watched a decent amount of them in high school, but they were still running when I stopped.
Yeah. I can't remember. I think it was like over a 5-year period, but you'd only get a couple episodes each time. Mm. I genuinely cannot remember. That seems so bad now. I kind of want to look it up, but also I'm too lazy to look it up. It's kind of long. Something shorter. Kind of spooky, but also lighthearted spooky. The game Gone Home.
I don't think I've heard of that.
It's probably one of my favorite games of all time. It's kind of like a point-and-click storytelling game. There's not much going on in it. So easy to play. And if you don't want to play it, you can always watch it, which is what I do for a lot of games. But I'd say Marble Hornets, long, but a good time. Gone Home, pretty short, a little spooky, but more lovely is what I'll say. So 2 different vibes from me.
This made me think of another thing. It shocks me to this day how much Dead by Daylight I played when that game was in its earlier days, because I really am not that much of like a horror video game type, and that's obviously not like, it's not a storyline game or anything. I would also say, though, I'm not usually, I don't know what to call that style of game, but I usually don't play it. Like, I don't usually do those sort of I don't know what to call it. This one's,
it's like a goal-oriented like team game. Yeah, I don't know
it's
what
like kind of a co-op. I mean, if you're playing a Survivor, which I did, it's like a co-op game, really, but also like it doesn't matter if other people die at the end of the day as long as someone gets out. But yeah, like I wasn't used to playing games like that where there's like, yeah, like sort of a high pressure team situation. But I got into it for a while, and I did kind of like how they'd add a new villain every once in a while. It sparked my interest back up to see the different mechanics they put in. So that was a lot of fun. I'm not sure I would go back to Dead by Daylight, but it was fun for the time.
Yeah. We went on a rant.
Yeah, it's cool.
There's a lot to see.
There's plenty out there for this wonderful time of year.
So yeah, if you have any spooky suggestions or ideas of what's going on in this book, hit us up on Twitter at 5050_books ?
I think so. I think that's right.
Okay. I'm sure you know by now. If not, everything it will be in the description. If I ever say anything wrong, which is entirely plausible, it'll be in the description. And yeah, we'll finish up next time. See you later.
Bye.